Hi, everyone. So today I have the pleasure of chatting with Charles Eisenstein. As many of you know, he wasn't always a dear friend, perhaps in past incarnations, but his work came into my life about a year and a half ago, and not a moment too soon, because I was at a point that I think many of you are aware of, having shared the journey with me, where I felt a level of exasperation, desperation, and hopelessness around all of my primary advocacies and points of activism. And I just only was really able to see the darkness. My mentor had passed away just previous to that point in time, and I was in a hole. And so Charles's book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, totally changed my trajectory. And like so many of these teachings, really just awakened something within me, that was dormant. It really just reminded me of something perhaps I already knew. And so I have, the honor and privilege of referring to you as one of my dearest friends at this point in time. And I often turn to you for your perspective on very complex matters, as you know. And what I think you offer, Charles, and what I want to share, with anyone who's not familiar with your work, and what we'll talk a bit about today, is I think you have a gift for bringing in awareness of the greater context and meaning of a perceived problem or conflict. And so much of my intention and agenda is around bringing meaning, deep personal meaning, to perceived health problems or diseases or labels of mental illness, sort of the kind of reclamation that can come from owning it as a teacher, right? Like owning your experience as a teacher. So today we could talk about 10,000 topics, but today I want to, sort of zoom in on a subject that is very, very near and dear to my heart personally and also professionally. And I want to talk about food specifically, and your perspectives on, how people should interface with all of the dietary information that is saturating, the internet at this point, the kind of overwhelm that people feel about finding the right diet, maybe because we sense that food is an important vector of information. But I think that your perspective is so much more nuanced. And so, as someone who, you wrote a tremendous book I've blogged about called The Yoga of Eating a long time ago. And I'd love to just maybe start out with sort of a bird's eye view of your relationship to this subject. Like, why is this of interest? Because you range in your sort of work from deep political analysis, to environmental activism, to just sort of the concept of conscious resistance in general as a life posture. And so I think it may surprise a lot of people, to learn that you're interested in such a mundane topic as what to eat and how to know what to eat. So, how did this get on your radar as, a subject of relevance to your experience, and then by extension, maybe, what you feel you have to share to others?
Well, one way it got on my radar is because I started eating at a very young age. And
to food yourself.
It's been pretty relevant to my life ever since. But actually, when I developed some interest in the topic when I was a teenager, and I approached the problem or the issue the same way that I was taught to approach every issue, which was mathematically. You gain the right information, you approach it scientifically. So you're supposed to get this many calories and this much protein, this much fat, this much vitamin, this and that. And the idea is that if you can get the numbers right, you're going to be healthy. But then I later came across conflicting information that said, no, what you need isn't X, Y, and Z, it's A, B, and C. And you need to only eat raw food or only eat this or not eat that. And each one of these dietary philosophies made a lot of sense to my untutored mind. I would be like, yeah, this is the gospel. And those other people, they just don't get it about living enzymes and the enzymatic potential that gets drawn down every time you eat cooked food, like those idiots, But then I would maybe read some Chinese medicine take on diet, and it would say, don't eat too much raw food because that dampens the digestive fire or the spleen qi or something. And like those people just don't get it about the spleen qi. So, okay, who am I going to believe? How do I find, and now with the internet, this was like 15, 20 years ago. Now with the internet, it's like you were saying, it's a jungle. And there's another problem too, which is even if you do find the right information, who says you're going to implement it? Because people do things to themselves all the time that they know is going to hurt them. And they don't do the things that they know is going to make them feel good. Like, why? Like, even if you had the perfect information, who says you're going to implement it? Like, what's going on when you do things that harm yourself? Like, consciously. Like, that you're aware. Babies don't do that. Animals don't do that. Like, because we have this biological guidance system of pleasure equals good, pain equals bad. Like, you don't touch a hot stove because it hurts. You know that. So one of the questions that I have gotten into is why is that? Why can't, or what would have to happen for us to be able to trust ourselves when it often seems that the thing that we want and that feels good is actually harming us? Do we have to then conquer desire just like we've conquered nature outside of ourselves? So that's kind of the starting point of the inquiry that I've been kind of dabbling in on and off. And then so I made this course because like people don't read books anymore, it seems. Like even I don't read books as much as I used to.
I read tons of books.
I read probably a third what I did 20 years ago.
Right. Now we want to have experiences at this point.
Yeah.
I think that's why people stopped reading books. Yeah.
Yeah. So I developed a course to deliver the information in a way that people could experience it and have some community around it, and yeah.
Right. So you call it dietary transformation from the inside out, and I think what you're trying to unpack is a message, because I read a lot of books, that I am receiving from a lot of different places. And, like, for example, one of the books I relished recently is called Pussy, a Reclamation, right? And what that book is about is how do you identify with your desire as your greatest advocate, right? How do you lead with literally bodily sensations to guide you through your life? And it seems like so many of us, right, in an effort to, unite with our bodies again, sort of re-embody, we're struggling with the intellectual constructs that are getting in the way, right? So it seems like what you're suggesting is if there is a breakdown between understanding and cognitive appreciation and then action, there must be something meaningful there, right? Because it can't just be that we only, grow through pain and pleasure only leads us to the, circles of hell. Can't be that totally flip-flopped relationship. So there has to be something there that we can gain better insight into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In our culture, we don't have a lot of encouragement to trust the body because we have a lifetime of indoctrination through school to trust the mind, to trust what authority is telling us, to trust the quantitative measures. And if you're a rational person, a scientific person, that's what you do. So that means that even if you decide, okay, this kind of makes sense, I'm going to try to trust my body. I'm going to let pleasure and desire guide me, what I discovered is that I hardly even knew what I wanted. And I hardly even knew what really felt good because I was so in the mind all the time. Eating things that I was telling myself, I must really like this because it's got X, Y, and Z in it. But actually, like, I didn't know if I liked it or not. I was not in touch with that. I was making a choice from somewhere entirely else. And that meant that the choice never had certainty behind it, never had conviction behind it. Because you shift to, another map, and that map says, no, this is bad. And so your conviction is only as solid as the information that you're receiving, from somebody else. And it seemed to me, it became important to me to recover inner authority. And it's like, this is one reason I'm doing this very, in a sense, narrow topic, although, food actually is related to everything. It's our primary relationship with the material world. So, but one reason I have brought some attention, and some of my energy and time onto this topic is that it is like really practical. It is something that I have personal experience with that actually works for me. Like the amount of liberation that I discovered when I really pursued this deep self-trust is incredible. Like people think I have a lot of willpower because, they're the cookies, and I don't eat any, or maybe I take a tiny bite of one or eat literally one potato chip, and they think I must have a lot of willpower. But it's the exact same amount of willpower it takes to not dig my thumb into my eye, Like, why would I do that? Because I've integrated the full experience of that food. And so, like, to not have to struggle to eat a healthy diet and to know what a healthy diet is, like those two pieces, it's just a tremendous gift that I've received. And like, I want to pass this on.
Totally. We have, what I find fascinating too is we have somewhat differing perspectives on how to cultivate this, because certainly in my approach as, sort of imprinted by Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, I, sort of am interested in a month experiential where people can ultimately free themselves of, these potentially more yo-yo-like relationships. At the end of that, it's up to you, to feel for that, self-authority and to sort of be able to begin to identify what you want. But what's interesting is while some people may balk at, sort of elements of my dietary recommendations or this template initially as being sort of, characterized by deprivation, by the end of the experience, it often is a portal to some greater transformation. And so, what I think we share language on, if not all of this, is the fact that the transformation for a sustained relationship, a free, healthy relationship with your diet, needs to be in realms other than just nutrition, right? So you talk about this idea that, sort of a conscious dietary approach can't exist in an otherwise unconscious cultural context in one's life, that the transformation has to be deeper. And so what I love about what you're positing is that it doesn't require some grand gesture, right? It can be as simple as just sitting with the mess of it all, sitting with your deep cravings and desires, responding or not responding, but that attention and awareness may be the first step, perhaps the only necessary step, intentional step, to generating this experience of unfolding and lasting change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, really the key to it is attention, giving attention to that which had been invisible or to that which had been unconscious, and integrating the things that we weren't paying attention to, which could be the pleasure or discomfort that comes from certain foods or certain eating habits that maybe you never paid attention to it because right after you're done eating, you turn on the television, or I know you watch a lot of TV, or you do something else to distract, or maybe you even binge on, a huge amount of potato chips or donuts or something, and then distract yourself from the discomfort by thinking, I'm never going to do that again. I'm turning over a new leaf starting tomorrow. Like, that is a way to distance ourselves from integrating the effects of a choice. And it's not just with food, too. It's any choice. So, yeah, it's just about bringing it, that's actually the hardest part is the easiest part. The hardest part for people to get is that merely paying attention to something will change you as a chooser. Even if you don't go through the whole rigmarole of, okay, that felt really bad, so I'm not going to do that again, because if I do that again, it's going to feel bad again. And that kind of regime of reward and threat, like trying to force yourself not to do something, that doesn't work.
And perhaps even not extrapolating it into behavioral commitment or change, right? What you're suggesting is just be with it.
Yep.
That's it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just that simple.
Just that simple. Yeah. I mean, you suggest that there are potentially unmet needs that drive a lot of our food behaviors. I think that's resonant for most people because we all get this concept of emotional eating, right? It's penetrated, popular consciousness, this idea that sometimes we eat just because we'd rather not feel whatever we would be feeling if we didn't eat whatever it is that we're choosing to eat. So is it important to sort of identify, do you think, what that unmet need is, or sort of where that source of pain is, or will that become clear, or does it on its own, or does it not really matter? Is it just simply acknowledging that there may be a driver beneath the self-soothing behavior that loosens its grip a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole module kind of on that question. It's hard to answer it simply, but it's not. I don't want to present it as this puzzle where you have to figure out, in your mind and understand mentally what it is that's driving your overeating. But sometimes it becomes really obvious. But even if you know what it is, that doesn't necessarily make it go away, because the need has to actually be met. So there could be an unmet need for, say, intimacy or connection, or just not hurting. That might make that might drive overeating. And just because you get that, oh yeah, I'm eating because I'm lonely. Oh yeah, I'm eating because my marriage sucks. And at least while I'm at the dinner table, the shitty marriage is after dinner. So as long as I keep eating, that might have been unconscious. Then you become conscious of it, but that does not necessarily improve the marriage. Doesn't make you less lonely, et cetera, et cetera. But at least you can stop beating yourself up about it and thinking that the problem is your lack of willpower or your greedy, selfish desires. And you can say, oh yeah, that's a symptom. And then giving attention to what hurts, giving attention to that loneliness, whether you can name it or not. But this is the path that we follow. This is like the avenue that takes us to the core. Giving attention to that thing then does generate changes. You might come across opportunities that you haven't had before, that you didn't recognize before, to change the circumstances that are generating the loneliness or the bad relationship or whatever. You'll be faced when these things come into consciousness. Often, along with them comes a choice that you can say, which self am I going to choose? Which being am I going to align with right now? So often a course like this, and your course I think is probably the same, it's not like this can come and rescue you, but it's that when somebody reaches a certain point where they're ready,
yes,
to transition to a different state of being, then the course appears in their lives because they're ready for it.
Yes, I'm just smiling because it's exactly what it's taken me a long time to learn. That perhaps either this information, again, like I said at the beginning, it serves as a remembrance for something that you couldn't hear the whisper of at an earlier stage in your life, and then it catalyzes the kind of change that was just waiting to unfold anyway. Sometimes I marvel at the outcomes, through my online course or even in my practice, and I wonder, was this just the fancy dress put on, the situation that was pre-existing but very ready? Is it just sort of the ritual necessary to give ownership back where it belongs, which is in this deep seat of self-authority, as you referenced. I mean, I wonder what you have to say about self-love, because, sometimes resistance to change is framed as being a deficiency of self-love, right? I'm not worthy of the kinds of outcomes that I know are on the other end of this change. I don't want to deal with that level of unknown. And so I'm not even going to bother engaging, because I'd rather sit in the familiar discomfort of my known reality. But, sometimes I imagine that self-love bubbles up out of this kind of multi-layered transformational process. It's revealed to you. But I do have the perspective that, commitment to self-care can precede a felt experience of self-love. Obviously, only if there's readiness. So maybe it's the readiness.
There's all these teachings about self-love, self-acceptance, self-worth, all these things, and I kind of agree with what all those spiritual teachers are saying about it, except for one thing. They imply that self-love is something that you can do through an act of will. Right. Okay, start loving yourself. Well, how do you do that? When people try to impose is not the right word. When people try to enact self-love because they have heard that it's a good thing to do and it'll solve their problems, they end up enacting kind of this counterfeit self-love, because deep down they still don't really believe it. So how do you actually learn to love yourself? And I think this gets down to the primary conceit of our culture, which is the separate individual, and the idea that this is something that you can do from your own will. For me, the way I learn self-love is people loving me and showing me how it's done, and loving me even in situations where I thought I was completely unlovable. And the more of that I receive, the better I'm able to love myself. So we're all kind of lifting each other up by the bootstraps, not lifting ourselves up by the bootstraps. And that's why people need, myself included, that's why people need the kind of the books, the courses, the seminars, whatever, the experiences that are becoming available, to kind of at least give that taste of what it's like,
Absolutely.
One thing that comes through in the course, I hope, is that I really, I'm not gonna say I love everybody, but I'm gonna say it's a release of judgment.
Yes.
I think maybe it's more of self-acceptance that I'm transmitting through. Just understanding, even if you're binging on sugar, maybe that is because when you were growing up, that was how your parents showed you love. And maybe that was the only way they showed you love. Or maybe you had a big deficit of the kind of thing that every child should get. In our culture, children grow up, I'm sure you know more about attachment theory than I do, but basic human needs are tragically unmet. in our civilization. And so what I see when I see somebody with any addiction, I see, oh, here's somebody who is valiantly trying to meet their needs with whatever is available. And if food is the only thing available for you to love yourself, and you're meeting your need that way, like there might even be wisdom in that. Like maybe there's an unconscious wisdom that's choosing food rather than heroin or something else. Like maybe there's an intelligence to that I'm not going to necessarily want to monkey with. But I'm assuming that maybe you're ready to be done with that. And so I'm offering the tools when someone is ready to be done with that, ready to transition to a higher level of well-being, then I'm just offering some tools for them to be able to do that.
Couldn't agree more. I think it strikes me based on what you just articulated in terms of, sort of the incubation that needed to occur in order for you to learn how to love yourself. This incubation in space, dyadic space with others who showed you that they were there unconditionally, right, in adult relationships. And it's interesting that perhaps what you're creating the experience of through this course is a means to do that within yourself, right? A means to show yourself a level of self-acceptance and presence no matter how you show up, in all of your flaws and wrong behavior and all the mistakes and failures and all the ways you said you were going to do something that you didn't. There's like an unconditional self-presence that you can cultivate without even having to feel that you love yourself. All you have to do is be there. And, I think we both know that's one of the parenting pearls of all time is you don't have to do anything fancy as a parent other than be there, judgment-free, for all of the tears and laughter and, screaming and raging or whatever it is. If you just don't set up conditions under which love flows, you've done the ultimate job as a parent now.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's more difficult than it sounds, but this is almost a reparenting exercise, perhaps, a way of showing yourself a kind of deep acceptance that then allows the wound to present itself for what it is, and then perhaps, it will transform. And I love that that's what you demonstrate through this course is, that it's highly possible that all of the behaviors you seek to change will end up changing before you even intended for them to change, just because of the, sort of conscious presence you can devote to. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it just occurred to me that one of the unmet needs that gets displaced onto food that I don't think I mentioned it in the course, but it's the need for attention, which, children don't get enough attention because their parents are overworked, overtaxed, living in a family in a box, and putting them, it's a pretty desperate situation. You can't give that much attention to a child. They should be getting attention from a whole community, from aunts and cousins and relatives and friends. And that's how people grew up in a village, like that cliche. Sometimes things are cliches for a good reason, like they're true, it takes a village, right? And we don't get that. So how do you give attention to yourself? Like how do you, okay, it's me time right now. Yeah, I'm going to sit down with that bag of popcorn. So as long as that need is unmet, you're going to keep wanting the popcorn.
There's something very precious and very available to people today around a self-guided experience of transformation. It's so much more valuable than something that was otherwise facilitated by a guru, a healer, or a doctor. And so I think that's why, this is incredibly valuable. It's such a powerful complement to, all of my accumulated perspectives on the power of nutrition as, a vector of epigenetic information all the way to a portal to psychospiritual transformation. And this is really a layer that is, in my opinion, not addressed by many of those who are seeking for the magic pill cure in a dietary template.
Right. But that doesn't mean that it's that like the kind of nutritional knowledge that that you traffic in is irrelevant.
Of course, yeah.
Right? Because what I'm offering is a way to know in your body that this is solid information that's useful to you, or not. But to know it in your body and not have to trust Kelly Brogan as opposed to trusting Dr. McCullough or trusting whoever else. Probably you and Dr. McCullough are fairly more or less aligned, but
Not on the food subject, actually.
But anyway, who are you going to trust, right? So this is
100%, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's still good to have a map, but to have some other resource that you can navigate and decide, is this the right map for me at this moment in my life? Because there might be a time in your life where you should be eating just plant foods, or you should be fasting, or you should be doing whatever, And then, of course, then there's the execution of it. Like knowing the right information, how do you actually stop eating the wrong things when willpower hasn't worked? Like you've tried that. But most people have tried that to threaten themselves. I got to stop eating like that because I'm going to get fat. I'm going to get sick. But no amount of threat actually works. It only works temporarily. And then then at some point you what's the phrase? Jump off the wagon, is it?
Right. Well, right. Because this overlaps into areas, we also agree that this is relevant to like all manner of addictive behaviors, from pulling your hair out to drinking, pint of vodka every 2 hours. It's
just going to have to try harder not to do that.
Right.
But that is a recipe for despair.
Yes.
And it's also judgmental. It says, you just didn't try very hard. Not as hard as me, because I've got my shit together and I've got the willpower that you don't have. Like, that is not spiritually true. That is false. And any program of self-control or healing that sources from that kind of judgmentality is going to end up biting you back.
100%. And that's why, I feel fundamentally in spirit and philosophy, we are totally aligned in our intentions, because I think it's worth being, approaching with circumspection any course or program that doesn't ultimately seek to put you in charge of your health and wellness destiny. That should be the goal of, in this era of, total intellectualized inundation, we have to find a way to ignite this within ourselves. And so I think that, what you're suggesting and what the tools that you offer are certainly a means to beginning to experiment with that.
With meditations, homework assignments, and then I'm making mini modules too, which I've only recorded one of, but I have, fasting, feeding children is one, exercise, I have a couple other topics that I'm going to, as new topics come up in the Facebook group that we have around us, then I'll, record 5 to 10 minute mini sessions on whatever comes up.
I hear meditations and, recordings and homework, and I feel overwhelmed, but having done it, it is 100% high yield and manageable, totally doable, totally accessible. Self-paced, and as is consistent with your, long-standing financial and economic perspectives. This is a by donation, a gift economy course. So whatever you feel is commensurate with its value, or what you imagine perhaps its value to be, is what you will pay for it, which I think is incredible. So I'm super excited. I obviously couldn't endorse it more, and found, I learned an incredible amount myself from it, even just to put language to something that is so clear to me in my observations clinically and personally. So I'm just, ever fascinated with whatever you're putting out there. So I want to thank you. Thank you for your gifts and for sharing them, and I look forward to the feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.